Step 5 is for you to develop a communication plan to share with your congregation throughout the year. Begin by using the narrative budget as part of your annual giving process. Use posters and bulletin inserts throughout the year to connect with parishioners. Highlight one ministry area each month to tell stories. Ask individuals to speak about the ministries they're involved in. Perhaps they'll write something for your e-news or record a short video for your social media page or to share online with your worship. And there is always a story to tell. Stephanie has heard me tell this story before. Maybe some of you have as well, but it's one of my favorite. I had a colleague outside of the Diocese of Virginia who was telling a story about the dreaded moment when the junior warden gets up during the ministry minutes during annual giving and wants to talk about the HVAC system or the carpet or the old tiles, and how quite often that just is not the motivating moment that the clergy and everyone else is hoping for to give everyone the inspiration to really pledge generously. And so one Sunday, the clergy was up in the prayer desk. It was time for the ministry minute, and the junior warden came up. And the junior warden said, "I want to talk to you about these light bulbs." And the rector said he just started sinking down at the prayer desk, thinking, "Oh, when are we going to start? We don't need to talk about light bulbs." And the junior warden said, "I want to talk to you about these light bulbs. I'm the junior warden, and this is part of my ministry here. These light bulbs shined on me and my wife when we got married. They shined on both of our babies when we baptized them. And last month, many of you were here when these lights shined on my mama as we prepared to bury her. These light bulbs light a path to God's kingdom." And the congregation was captivated. So there are possibilities for a compelling, rich story. If there is a story that is important to tell, my hunch is if you give it some creativity and some thought, there is a rich story there, even if it's about your HVAC system. All right. So do we have the annual? Yes. Our annual giving program has, for last year and for this year, the logo includes a number of these icons that you see here on the screen. And these icons are a part of the many ministries that are involved in the church, and that's why they are in the main logo for annual giving and the logo for our Diocese of Virginia theme. But they are also available individually and in all of these different colors so that you too can take these icons and use them to tell a story, a narrative budget story if you want, around your church. You can take these and individually pull them out, hang them around the church. You can also, make a sticker, put them on name tags, hand them to the kids to color in with rainbows when you're all back together. These icons do not have specific designations. They are available for you to decide what story you want them to tell. We have a couple with hands. We have some that are outside. So choose the one that speaks most deeply to the culture and context of your congregation and the ministries that you offer, and use them. Be playful with them. Perhaps you could have a ministry bingo, but they are yours to use. If you used them last year, they are the exact same. We have that consistency just to help you out and provide that continuity. To please take these as you will and use them around your church to tell your story. Stephanie.
Thank you. I'm going to pause for a moment before we move on to think about the work that our churches do that we can't easily quantify. And there may be more of that work this year than most. Just because we can't mold our ministry into a chart doesn't mean we can't include it in our narrative budget. I love this quote, and I use it here because it's true. although it might not actually have been said by Mr. Einstein. Just because your church has something wonderful that can't easily be counted doesn't mean there isn't a place for it in a narrative budget. It just means that you get to use your creativity to find a place to tell that story in the best possible way. Does it belong in print? Maybe it would make a good video or a blog post because you could use a longer form to tell that story. Or maybe it's a shorter form, a ministry moment where someone could tell their story personally. These are good things to consider, good questions, and when you come up with these questions, write them down and keep them. They'll help you build this story, or maybe even another one as you go through this process. But what kind of things can you count? Depending on what the rest of the year looks like, there may be fewer of these items on the list to count, but I offer them as examples. You'll have worship in some form likely to count, or you'll have ways in which you reached out to parishioners that you can count. My congregation not only has maintained worship virtually, but we have a new service, so we would include that. We don't have a food pantry for ourselves, but we have become involved in a food pantry at a neighboring congregation. And we could certainly include the amount of food collected and dropped off to aid their food ministry. Outreach might be different this year too. My parish worked on a habitat house early in the year, but since the pandemic, volunteers aren't allowed to build. They were invited to a virtual open house by the new owner, and certainly we could include that story. We moved our supper club to a virtual environment in March, which not only extended it beyond its original time frame, but now allows for additional participation because no one has to worry about driving at night in the dark. So think about ways in which your congregation has maintained connections with one another. Think about ways that your congregation has made a difference in your community. There may be items you can count here. There will certainly be stories that you can tell. So now we're going to begin to look at some different ways that congregations have chosen to express their narrative budgets. This was from St. Peter's in the Woods webpage. Quick screenshot taken right from their webpage, some quick numbers, and it tells a quick story about them. It tells you something about themselves as a community, what they have done across a year, and I just love it. This example is from a church in Georgia, and I love this purely online narrative budget. Here's some great key elements to notice. They've brought along a piece from their story. So this is the Christian education piece, but here were the other ministry areas that they chose. You can see the percentage and dollar amount portion that they included here. Lots of pictures, multi-generational pictures. It's wonderful. You see the areas of ministry in their congregation, and then you see the brief narrative that gives a fuller explanation of the work in their congregation. And we love these narrative budget posters from St. Stephen's Culpeper that they did a few years ago. This church has an average Sunday attendance of around 125, but look how simple math tells a story of a tremendous and passionate ministry. If you have a food pantry, you have already collected this information. I know you have. And this one beautiful picture tells such a fantastic story. We're not even going to leave St. Stephen's here because this is such a beautiful photo. I have to include it. If you want to take a look at your worship experiences together as a congregation for any year, especially last year, you'll have all of this in a parochial report. And if you spent 5 minutes using simple math, you could figure out this level of detail. But you might even this year want to think about what your virtual worship would look like and what kind of picture you would include that would elaborate on what that virtual worship looked like for you.